G'day everyone. Welcome to the Outback Packers podcast, the podcast where two mates from all the way across the world have a yarn talking Packers football and the green and gold. I'm Nick Gregory, as always, joined by my co-host Iowa Joe. Today with special returning guest, friend of the pod, Mike Kawano. Mike, how are you? It's always good to talk to you. Good to have you on again.
Thanks for having me. No, I'm doing good. Just waiting for the regular season to get here.
Yeah, it's kind of like full swing. It's like your guys' summer is like the real dead zone of the off season.
Yep. So that's where we are right now. We're in the doldrums.
Yep.
Mike, we're just gonna have to make you like a permanent host with as many times as you've been back for us so far.
That's your guys' decision to make.
That'd be fun.
What are we at? We're at this is.
I just like the
number
record
4.
to show I did not force myself onto these two. They came back to the well with the little hood thing is falling in on it. Some stones are falling out of the side. There might be a skeleton.
You know you were messaging me every other week asking when's the next time I'm coming on.
There's Joe dropping me back in the well.
No, it's great. It's always fun to have you on because I know we're going to get a good time out of it. So
appreciate it.
You know,
really
it's great having you back, and you know,
always.
What?
Yeah.
I don't even know what we're talking about, Nick. You know, I just showed up. Like I told Kawano before recording, I just show up and let Nick handle everything else.
So yeah, you know, as Mike mentioned, we're in like the real dead spot of the season, and so I kind of wanted to take this as an opportunity to just slow down a little bit and kind of go back with a fine-tooth comb over this draft class. I wanted to start with the defense because I know Mike is a lot smarter about football than I definitely am, and maybe even Joe as well. That's what I wanted to take a chance just to.
Thanks a lot. Here, I was feeling good about myself, and then Nick drops those kind of bombs.
Well, yeah, I'm definitely keen to get Mike to kind of talk us through what he thinks about these defensive prospects. I was kind of like a little bit confused as to kind of how these guys will be implemented, so I'm definitely interested to hear what Mike thinks. But before then, you know, I just want to kind of go, as we always do every single week, just kind of get our bearings on what's going on in Packers Twitter. There was that interview with Rodgers that came out yesterday, the day before on The Athletic. I don't want to go too in depth on it, but I just want to acknowledge that it happened. I just think it's so funny that like he's still so spiteful of something that happened 4 years ago now, and even the floor was getting like pot shots. Like it's just so.
I even paid the $1 just to read the damn thing because I was like, okay, what the hell is everybody talking about? And it just you can tell that he tries to bend the truth to fit his narrative, and it just I don't understand. I guess he's always been this way. He's always had that chip on his shoulder. He always thinks people are wrong on him. So, but it's done. It's over. Just quit it. And I have to kind of put the fault a little bit on Schneidman too, because Schneidman, you know, called him up and say, "Hey, I'm doing this article. Do you feel like talking?" Well, that was a stupid thing to do because we all know Aaron Rodgers is going to talk, especially when it comes to taking pot shots at the Packers. So, whatever. I used to say I was a big Rodgers fan, but now that more and more is coming out and the more he talks, I'm really I'm over it.
Yeah, I mean, like Schneidman is very good at his job. I give him credit for that, and he definitely knew that Rodgers would love to talk. But yeah, some of the excerpts I just found
Schneidman.
Yeah, me too. Mike, any thoughts on that kind of stuff before we kind of move on here?
None that need be said.
Yeah.
Smart man.
Feel that.
No wonder we keep bringing you back.
Yeah, like obviously.
Okay, I have to say, if you guys hear weird noises in the background, my dog is having a fit right now because I've got her locked in here with me. So just mind the noises because it's a pissed off.
And eagle. I apologize if I forget to mute before I have to cuss mine out because they're barking at something, random on the street.
Yeah, no, all good. obviously OTAs are still continuing. We're going to be kind of seeing glimpses. It's the optimistic off season where everyone's in the best shape of their lives. Every rookie is a future All Pro. Most Jordan Love passes are perfect. I think it's just really nice to get the first look at these guys always, and we kind of just all off season leading up to the draft, we've been joking about how Green Bay has never had really athletic tight end since Jermichael Finley, and it's really interesting to see these guys out there, these big lanky dudes who can run really fast. And obviously, it's just short videos, don't really mean anything, but it's exciting. It's like it's a nice time before we get crushed with reality in week one, but. The whole just seeing this happen, and obviously Joe's about to go up in a couple of days here. So yeah, just getting a look at these guys on the field is just really nice, and I'm very happy to have them on the team.
Well, like Mike and I were kind of talking before we recorded, we were trying to come up with the perfect analogy for what these OTAs were, and we were kind of discussing whether or not it kind of fit like baseball spring training or not, but it's basically like the combine all over again. It's the underwear Olympics, just to get out there, get, moving around, get in shape if they need to, and whatever. And Kawano's getting pissed off at his dogs out there.
My Rottweiler is protecting us from a plastic bag.
Very brave.
But it's good to see. I mean, it's nice to hear the good things come out, because we know just as well that the bad things could be coming out. I mean, but you also have to take everything that's being said with a grain of salt, because like Nick just said, everybody's in the best shape of their life. Everybody's going to be an all pro and all that stuff. But, it's nice to hear some of the things coming out of like the coach's mouth. I mean, it was kind of an I was looking for the audio, but I couldn't find it just before we recorded from LaFleur saying about Jordan Love that, he's looking good, but there's still some things he needs to clean up and but also when asked about Musgrave, he goes, well, I really like his speed. So he's still being cagey with some of his answers. But this time of year, you take everything with a grain of salt, but you enjoy it while it lasts.
For sure.
Yeah, I know Mafia always jokingly but seriously calls draft season, the time right before the draft, lying season. It's not, I wouldn't call it lying season right now, but, it's tempered expectation season right now. But like Joe kind of alluded to, it's just good to see the guys out there, get to see Love make throws on a practice field kind of thing and stuff. Like and that was the thing we were kind of alluding to, is it's like the reason I bring up like spring training, or even if it's just catchers and pitchers report time for baseball, is like, don't read too much into like Love got intercepted. I know it's going to get overplayed because of who he's replacing, but just remember Rogers threw interceptions in training camp and OTAs. And the reason I liken it to baseball's pitchers and catchers and preseason too a little bit is because while no, they're not playing like a live or even a simulated game right now, they're trying stuff. And it's just like when you see like Cy Young pitchers with a 5 ERA in spring training, and you're like, whoa, why does he suck right now? It's because he's working on a new pitch or something like that and all. And you joke about it that it's the time to kind of mess around and see what you got and what you don't got kind of thing, with whether it's Love making certain throws or if it's what his receivers can and can't do. And obviously with the caveat of there's no shoulder pads, no, it's not full contact or anything, but just seeing guys run with their helmet on and stuff like that. So it's good to at least go on air kind of thing, and kind of put the stuff that he's been doing with his private coaches to work with the guys he's going to be playing with this season.
Well, and let's also say that it's a good way for the new guys to start learning the playbook without having to be full bore on it. They can, let's like Lucas Van Ness, from everything that I've been reading on him, he's been having some pretty solid practices, but it's a lot easier to do them now without the pads, without the pressures, because the linebacker coach or the edge coach, I'm trying to think what's the edge coach's name?
Rebovich.
Yeah.
Rebovich, yeah.
Can say, all right, well, in an actual situation, you might try this a little bit differently. Whereas if it's game week, they have to know that this is my assignment, this is what we have to do. Whereas they can tweak a little bit more in the OTAs and say, all right, we'll try this a little bit, go work in the weight room a little bit, or go run a couple laps, get loose and all that stuff. They're not so much worried about gameplay at the moment as they are just instilling and conditioning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like Nick said, and I've been saying the last couple of weeks, I'll be up there in a couple of weeks just because, hey, I got to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm going to put it to the test. I'm going to be out there on the field yelling at them. No, I'm really not. I'd probably get arrested, and I don't really want to get arrested.
Just for the being on the field part, not the yelling part.
I'm too pretty to go to jail.
But it's kind of, as a saying in music, that's kind of like along the lines of if you're sounding good in the practice room, you're kind of doing it wrong. And it's like a little bit the same in football. I feel it's like like you guys have said, you should be using this time to take risks and see what you can get away with, not necessarily just trying to be the best at every single thing.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't know you were not done yet. You kind of took a minute there, but I just want to bring up that I'm really liking what I'm seeing out of the bonding of the team.
Yeah.
The whole Memorial Day weekend trip with Jordan Love and Christian Watson and, people, that group of guys, it was really great to, it was great to see those guys bonding because really, let's face it, outside of like a few instances, we really never saw that out of Aaron. And, it's nice to see these guys communicate because usually you can transfer the communication from off the field to on the field because you guys start learning the synchron. God, I can't even freaking talk tonight.
You start to look and talk and think alike a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, they synchronize. There you go. That's the word I was synchronize. But they looked like they were having fun and, poor Simone Biles got beat to hell by Christian Watson on that race they had. And Christian almost fell on his face to start it off and still beat her by a good chunk. But, it's really nice to see that the camaraderie is starting to show up and they're really, really growing together so far. It makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah. For everything that Roger says about, like not needing to hang out with his players and stuff like that and, not needing to do the extra work, all the receivers he had the best chemistry with were the guys that he was personal friends with. Jordy, Devontae, James Jones. The guys that he had that kind of like next level telepathic kind of thing going on. Guys that he hung out with. Like you said, Joe, that is, besides everything about football, just getting to know each other and know how they operate under the hood. It's just, it's just good for them as a team as well as on a personal level. It's just good for the team in general.
Yep, definitely.
And it does help that Love is like, he's the oldest out of all these guys. Like, it's him and DeGuara. But, they're all within, like, 4 years of each other, basically, kind of thing. And, like, I get it from Roger's point of view. Like, it'd be like me hanging out with, like, my sister's friends kind of thing because my sister's 10 years younger than me kind of thing and stuff. And it's like, we have nothing to relate to kind of thing and stuff. But it's like, at the same time, like, I know what you're getting at is like, make an attempt everyone, like take them out to dinner or something like that. You don't gotta like, you don't gotta be buddy every time, but like do a Memorial Weekend thing or something like that. It doesn't have to be every day and stuff. You hear the rumors that it's like, oh, I like never hang out with him, that kind of thing. And like I said, part of it is the age gap. He's an 80s kid and these are late 90s and early 2000s kids at this point, but it's make the effort kind of thing.
Mike, look at it this way. I'm 36, Nick's 21.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's almost like doing a podcast with a 21-year-old. Would never do that.
But, I hate to, like, step it up there, but you'd even have, like, Drew Brees or Peyton Manning and Tom Brady at least have these camps where they'd bring all the players in and, have these moments with them where they could bond and work out together. You never really saw that with Aaron.
I mean, for sure.
There you go again. We saw the videos and the pictures from Memorial Weekend of, Jordan Love and them. And then we turn around and see videos of Aaron Rodgers with his new woman at a Taylor Swift concert. You can't tell me he couldn't have went to a concert with his teammates in Green Bay, especially a Taylor Swift concert. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't listen to Taylor Swift, but I'm pretty sure that's young people music.
Yeah.
The tickets were exclusive.
And he's sitting and he's dancing around, having a ball. Good for him. Mm. But what makes bonding with those younger players any different than bonding with the young players in Green Bay?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well,
I made it. Bastard.
God.
I'm sorry, people who listen. I'm on one tonight, so it's going to happen. Fucking Ben Albert's lucky he's not on here tonight because I'd have ripped him a new one too. Talk about a callback.
So let's get into the intention of this episode, the content, if you will. So, like I mentioned at the top of the episode,
we're recording an episode.
Apparently, allegedly. Just having fun and recording it. Maybe they don't even upload it.
Sorry, go ahead. I told you I am really on one tonight, so
no, all good. So going over the defense here, there's a few draft picks on defense. Obviously, we spent a lot on the tight ends and the receivers and things like that, but these guys, some of them will still be projected to be starters or second or third stringers. Colby Wooden, Lucas Van Ness is probably going to be Preston Smith's replacement. Carl Brooks, Carrington Valentine, Anthony Johnson Jr. I feel like out of those five, Valentine is probably going to have the least impact in his career, most likely. But even then, guys like Colby Wooden, there's no more Jaron Reed, no more Dean Lowry. They're kind of looking for more of a presence on the inside. And it's funny because Colby Wooden, a guy he's only listed at 285, and he's on the chart. He's listed as a defensive end or a defensive tackle. Just like really kind of strange or like non-typical body types for what you'd usually see. Even Carl Brooks, if you're looking at as like purely physically, you would almost think that like they drafted 3 edges in this class. So I'm just really curious to see how they're going to be implemented into this system. But I mean, how do you feel about this, Mike?
I think that they're all going to start off as sub-package rushers. Even Van Ness, I think, even let's just say Rashawn isn't ready to come back at the start of the season. I do think he's going to start on PUP just because, he tore his ACL on, I think it was November 9th.
Week 9.
And then so, the start of the season is like a short, the short side of 10 months basically at that point. So that's pushing it. I know Elton got hurt in the kind of the same window, and I know Tunyon was hurt even before that and came back, but look what Tunyon was when he came back. He couldn't run, and Jenkins, it took him a while to really and part of it was he was playing tackle, but part of it too was he just wasn't moving as good as he was before the injury. So I do think Van Ness is going to be, he's going to be your edge 3. They're going to kind of break him in. They're going to let him test the waters that way and kind of let him get his feet wet as a sub-package rusher. And then the more snaps you see him get on rundowns, that'll mean that he's progressing along kind of thing and stuff. That'll be kind of that's the way that I look at it in terms of his progression, in terms of picking up the playbook and stuff, because pass rushing is pretty, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's a lot easier to learn pass rush rules than it is to learn all the run stopping rules. And we'll kind of get into that when we get into the Packers defensive philosophy. And that's kind of the same thing for Wooden and Brooks, in that I think they're primarily going to be used as sub-package pass rush guys, Brooks in particular, just because of his size, because for all intents and purposes, they're looking at him and thinking, can we get another Mike Daniels? That's basically what I think Gutekunst is gambling on with Brooks. With Wooden, I think that they're looking for someone in the mold of Mike Neal, when Mike Neal was still a D lineman when he was a rookie and a second-year player coming out of Purdue, where, like Nick said, he's not your stereotypical, yoked up 5 technique, but he's someone who can play 5 technique, but he's here to get some interior pressure. And that's the reason that he was drafted. And, my preference was Ojomo from Texas. I thought that he's a guy where you know what his role is right now, but he did have, athletic upside and pass rush ability that I thought would play up more in the pros than it did in college. But Green Bay has always picked the guys with pass rush potential over the guys that are like right now a run stuffing kind of player and stuff. So I think that you're going to see him break in as pass rush specialists, and then, like I said, the turn you're looking for them to make is, by around week 8 or 9 to see if they start to get more early rundown snaps, and not injury driven kind of thing or anything like that. You want to see them sort of start to earn those reps, and that's something that even Wyatt didn't really do. And I get it, because the situation is a little different, and that's the thing, is like last year's team, people were always like, why isn't Wyatt playing more? What the problem with that is that the team wasn't eliminated from playoff contention. And I know this isn't the answer people want to hear, or the most like exhilarating one, but until the team was eliminated, they were going to lean on the veterans to take them home kind of thing and stuff. It's a very old school kind of way of thinking, but like, and it's kind of what I'm getting at is like, you're trusting your vets to know their run sets. And it's funny talking about that with Reed, and especially with Lowry, because he was just a human blow up doll on on rundowns. But it's one of those where they trust their vets to be in the right position in run defense, because it is a gap control run defense. So the faster those two guys on the D line can pick it up, the better. And honestly, depending on what sub packages Van Ness gets himself into, he might get some interior snaps too. Like they won't have him there intending to defend the run, but I do think he might get some of those like Za'Darius snaps, or kind of like when we used to put Julius Peppers down with his hand down as a 3 technique kind of thing and stuff, especially if Rashawn's out for, on PUP, he's going to miss 4 weeks. So I think Van Ness would be the guy because they don't really have a guy with that kind of a frame to take those snaps up. And then you'd still have like a Hollins and JJ Inigbare and Preston to play the edge, and you can kind of use Van Ness as that joker kind of rover rusher role that we've seen Rashawn do recently, and obviously Za'Darius made it kind of big in 2019. So that's kind of the super surface level outlook on those guys.
Now, is there a possibility that we could see more of a 4-3 front with the type of guys that the Packers have brought in?
Definitely. Okay, so that's something that I've talked about. Like Mafia and I have gone back and forth about it. And so, yeah, Green Bay is a 3-4 defense more in name than it is in substance, like, because they play so much sub package. And that's the thing, is like, their sub package fronts are all 4-man fronts. They play, they're playing with 2 linebackers, but their linebackers are really edge rushers. So, they're standing up, but they're really playing like a 4-man, like a 4-2-5 nickel than as opposed to like a 2-4-5 nickel kind of thing. So, and Mafia and I were joking about it, how like, because the one of the things that came up is like Leslie Frazier visited the Packers, and Green Bay is, and it's like, and I kind of jokingly raised the question of, I know he's mostly been a 4-3 guy, but does he have any chops with 3-4? But at the same time, if they, for whatever reason, decided to move on from Barry in season, sneak preview, I don't think they would. But if for whatever they did, I don't think it would be that big of a transition to go from what Green Bay does to a 4-3 being their base, because they basically run a 4-man front in all their sub packages, whether it's their nickel, their dime, even their penny look is more of a 4-man front. It does get into that, who they bring up on the line of scrimmage and stuff like that. So it's kind of semantics, but yeah, it's by nature of what they do and what they have, it's gonna look like a 4-man front most of the time, especially when these rookies are playing.
Well, and to kind of go off what Nick was saying, it just so happens I was on the Packers roster because of what Mike and I were talking about before we started recording. So I just went and looked a little bit, and they actually have Wooden listed at 273. Well, that's even lighter than what Rashawn was when he was drafted. And then Brooks was listed at 295. So I could see Brooks taking that Dean Lowry role because that puts them around the same size, and hopefully Brooks can have a little bit more of a success than Dean did. We'll just put it nicely. But it's weird that they're taking such light players, but the Packers really never have been the type to bring in huge guys. I mean, TJ Slayton was about the only outlier right now as to guys being drafted that were, mountain of men. And so it's going to be interesting. I know Devontae Wyatt's been out for the voluntary camp so far, and so
or he's there, but he didn't participate in teams, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And Wooden and Brooks have been basically taking his snaps. So, I mean, they still view him as DL, down lineman. Who knows? They could be doing the hybrid. They've always wanted that hybrid type player. So Wooden could be that hybrid that could both play the down lineman and the outside edge when need be. I think this first year, in my opinion, I'm going to put it that way. But Nick said Kawano was smarter than me, so, my opinion don't matter too much anymore. I think for the first year, Van Ness is just going to be nothing but pure stand-up outside linebacker or edge rusher, just until they can get him built up and get some pass rush moves built into him, because that's been the biggest knock since before he was drafted, was he only had the one real move. I mean, he was a little bit of a speed guy, but it was all purely, bull rush. There was no, he didn't have a swim move. He didn't have an undercut. He didn't have any of that kind of thing. So I think at least for this first year, he's going to be more of a stand-up guy than he is going to be like a down lineman. So I could see that coming later on if they say, all right, well, he's picking up pretty fast. He's doing pretty good. Let's start throwing a little bit more at him. So that's how I view it a little bit. But of course, like Nick said, Kawano's smarter than me on this stuff. So
yeah, no, definitely. I think like what you guys are saying is very interesting, and kind of like we're not really sure how long Joe Barry's going to be around. I mean, this is kind of his last year to prove that he can do something. I really don't see him sticking around. If he underperforms again, I don't think he'll be around next year. I'm not sure when his contract expires, but I just don't. Yeah, I just feel like a fourth year with this mediocrity is pretty brutal, even for the Packers.
I could be wrong, but coach contracts are really weird because they have this thing where they can just re-up them, automatically.
Sure. Especially assistant coaches. They're like, they might be multi-year, but they also kind of are just like multiple 1 year kind of things and stuff.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, because like, even like Pettin wasn't fired, right? They just didn't bring him back. So that's why I think I would have like you said, Mike. I don't think he would be fired mid-season unless something terrible happened. Which again, this is a kind of testing year. I don't really see that happening.
I think the only way he gets fired in season is like, so, we've heard reports in the past where LaFleur's like told him like, do this, do that kind of thing. And then this whole offseason, we've heard that LaFleur is taking a much more hands-on approach to the like both sides of the ball. He's, trying to attend more meetings on the defensive side and that kind of stuff. And I think the only way Barry gets fired is if like LaFleur says, this is the game plan. This is what you're going to do this week. And if he just says, no, like I'm doing it my way kind of thing. I think that would be the only way to, because, Barry comes like highly regarded, and that's the thing, like, is behind closed doors, like everyone in the league loves him. Like he's pretty universally well thought of in the league circles and stuff like that. And I think that it would have to take something big like that where he just kind of flips the bird at LaFleur kind of thing and, says, no, like, you get out of my room kind of thing. And then LaFleur's like, all right, there's the door. So I think it would take something on the extreme like that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
No, go ahead. I'm trying to form my thought because I'm
Yeah, but I think because the Packers kind of are bracing for. Not, I don't think they're planning for his replacement just yet, but it's like they have pieces in place for a potential succession plan. Like, I think, like yeah, I said, Leslie Frazier, like not as in like a potential head coach replacement. Defensive coach replacement, but I think they kind of just like trying to bolster the coaching staff on the defensive side. Like losing guys like Mike Smith is still like really a really big deal on this defense, and especially when we have so much young talent. I think it's really important to emphasize the development of those guys. And yeah, I think like next year, like I'm not sure who was really going to be available, but like even like you guys just talked about, the whole 3-4-4-3 thing is like like not really as solidified as it used to be in the NFL, but things like that, like philosophical differences, we'll get into that like right after this, how the Packers currently run their defense, but like after so many years of this style of defense, the kind of more softer, hands-off kind of approach, they might be looking to shift to something a bit more physical, a bit more, a bit more man coverage, as much as there is in today's NFL. It just feels like this is a side of the ball that could be totally different in the next couple of years if things change.
What I was thinking was we've talked about this before where I wish Joe Barry could like be demoted to just be like the linebacker coach, because Joe Barry is such a good linebacker coach. But I don't think he can handle the defensive coordinator position. So if there was some way the Packers could hold on to him as the linebacker coach and bring in somebody to fill that defensive coordinator spot, but I just don't see Joe Barry taking that step back. They would have to get rid of him first. So I don't know. As for Leslie Frazier, yeah, it's a good thought, but he's come out and said he still wants to be a head coach. So even if they brought him in as like a defensive consultant this year, he's gone next year if he gets the opportunity to be a head coach. So there'd be no reason to try keeping him around because he still wants to be a head coach.
No, for sure. Yeah. Well, going back onto the past 2 years of Joe Barry, the Joe Barry experience, how do we kind of feel about this philosophy? And look, I know, when Sam was on here the first time, we talked a lot about how people get so antsy about the zone coverage thing. But like in the NFL, defenses play majority zone coverage in basically every single defense. It's actually the exception if you play more than like 50%, even at 50%. I personally, like philosophically, I think it's fine. The whole like bend, don't break, like, and even like the thing with like the run defense not being as like not being the focus. Like, I definitely think it matters, but I'm also kind of fine with them not prioritizing it if the pass rush and coverage is really good. I mean, like Ross Uglum kind of raised this point when after the game happened, the game against the Eagles where Jalen Hurts, ran for all those yards and they totally destroyed us on the ground. Even with all those rushing yards, we still could have won that game. Like, obviously, it's not ideal, and like you're not gonna encourage them to like win on the ground. But even as terrible as that run defense was, it didn't actually stop us from being in the game. And so I'm kind of fine with them not dumping heaps of resources into run defense. I mean, philosophically, I'm kind of okay with that. But obviously, that hinges on the other parts of the defense actually being good.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, you can't, in this day and age, you can't cover everything. And so if you want to be more, the game, it's a passing game, no matter what the Eagles do or what any team does with an explosive running attack, it's always going to be about limiting the passing attack. And if you want to have more guys in coverage, it means that your run defense is reliant on, what I was talking about before, gap integrity. And that's, that's one of those where it's like, okay, you have choices up front. So, we've seen Barry, he does try to mix it up. He doesn't just play like edge defenders. You've got to hold the edge and funnel everything inside kind of thing. Because, okay, if you do that, like I said, we play so much sub package with
guys who aren't, we don't have a true nose tackle on the field every down kind of thing, because we can't just have Kenny die out there with no help. But, if you're running
trying,
out there,
though.
yeah, I know, right? But let's say you're in a sub package where it's Preston, Van Ness, Wyatt, and Wooden are your front four guys. And you tell, okay, if they run the ball, funnel it inside. It's like, well, okay, but then that means that Campbell and Quay have no meat in front of them kind of thing. Wyatt isn't a small guy, but he's not a big guy by NFL standards. So, there's choices you have to make. And what we've seen him do is we've seen him do that. We've seen him where, they try to just say all 11 guys are responsible for a gap. And Ross has had tweets about this where it's like, if you're going to play that defense, your safeties have to come up and fill the run. And I know Savage doesn't have a good track record for that, but even Amos, who was Mr. Dependable, he wasn't good at it this season. As much as Savage was not great at it, Amos was not good this season either in terms of run defense. So, it takes it's not just the scheme. You've got to have complete buy-in from your defensive players. And I do think there was, we'll never know what the full story was, but it did seem like there was some sort of thing between Barry and Jerry Gray where we could sense the undertones of it all season where, you had that weird one where Savage and Amos were kind of trying not to step on toes, but also pissed after a game because, they knew that everyone was like, the safeties suck and it's all their fault. And they're like, hey man, you can't say that because you don't know why someone is running wide open with no coverage guy around them kind of thing and stuff. So like I said, we'll never know, what exactly happened behind the scenes, but something wasn't kosher in 1265 Lambeau on the defensive side of the ball from a coaching perspective. Guys just seemed to be a really weird relationship between the coverage to the rest of the defense this season. But I do think there are times where, there's the whole philosophy of, why don't they play more press? Why don't they, and it's the whole, so the reason they don't play more press, and I'm not saying I agree with it every time but because Green Bay plays so much cover 4 and cover 6, where one side of the field is playing cover 4, you can press, but that means that guy who's pressing has to get on his horse and bail to deep coverage. And so you can only do it so many times before the other team's like, okay, we're just going to run a hitch and it's going to be an easy 5 yards every time because that dude is pressing you, but you've just got to win in a second because he's gone after that. He's getting 2 hands on you and he's bailing to the deep corner of the field. And so, whereas the idea is we play off because it's easier to come up, it's easier to trigger downhill and attack a play kind of thing. But the thing there is you have Stokes who's, got beat a couple times in week 1, then it gets in his head. Then he's like, oh shoot, do I, am I reading this right? Do I need to sit an extra second and wait for it to happen kind of thing? There's a million different things that are happening. And I think what fans sometimes forget is that these are human beings. They're not, it's not Madden where every time it's going to guess right that I'm supposed to jump this flat route kind of thing. And the reason that they don't is because they're Dusty put this great play. It's called flood. What is flood? It means that you put 3 receivers to one side of the field because you're trying to stretch zone defenders out and force those defenders to pick. Do I get the guy in front of me or do I have to go chase the guy in back of me kind of thing? You high-low them all over the place. And that's sort of the conundrum that, defenders are in, is because you ask every zone defender, what are they afraid of? Getting beat in back of them. So that's why they're always playing back. And so it's a combination of a lot of different things. And the thing I was kind of trying to get into fans is that at the end of last season is there was the whole what if Brandon Staley isn't the Chargers coach? I was like, Staley is going to run a similar defense. It's going to be a quote unquote bend don't break defense. He might do some different window dressing, some different pre-snap looks and things like that. But I was like, if you don't like Barry's run defense, you're really going to scratch your head on some of the things Staley does because he plays lighter boxes than Barry does. So he's kind of more like Pettin in that sense where he's going to play a lot of dime and stuff like that, just because he wants he wants speed on the field and stuff. So there's no like magic bullet other than if you get just perfect players on your defense. And surprise, surprise, Green Bay doesn't have 11 of those on their roster. So there's going to be some window dressing. There's guys are going to have to play a little above their head. But like Nick was kind of getting at, is that, the nice thing is that there isn't pressure on the Packers to do anything. The only things the Packers have to do this year is find out what Love is he good or not, and then find out who the guys are worth keeping on this defense kind of thing. I think Rashawn is a foregone conclusion. I know some people are making buzz about like, oh, Kenny Clarkson. They're going to re-extend him. Like, he'd have to, knock on wood, he'd have to get catastrophically injured. And as much as I busted on Kenny last year for kind of like going into hibernation after the New England game last year, it's not like he had a lot of help out there. I was, to whom when there's great responsibility, to whom much is given, there's great responsibility. We've seen Kenny be Superman in the middle of that line with nobody's around him kind of thing. And I thought last year he just had a down season, but then by the second half of the season, he looked like Kenny effing Clark again. And so, he's not anywhere close to 30 at this point. And I think that, that's all this side, whether it's looking at it from on the sideline in terms of Barry, some of the other position coaches, cough Jerry Montgomery. I do think Rebrovich is a keeper. I think he's actually a really good coach. You look at his track record. You look what he did with Enigbari last year, especially after Rashawn got hurt. He had Enigbari producing up to what his like college pressure rates were. I think he's a keeper. I think he's as much as losing Mike Smith was a buzzkill, Rebrovich has actually been a sneaky good hire by LaFleur to fill Smith's shoes. And I am kind of excited to see what Greg Williams brings as the secondary coach. I know some people are kind of like, oh, like, what's he done and stuff. Like, he's coached. Okay, it's not his fault that Arizona had a bunch of nobodies and Byron Murphy as their best cornerback, and then Budda Baker was obviously their best DB, but that wasn't his fault. Like, he's not drafting the guys he's working with. But, he's worked with Eric Weddle. He's worked with some decent, I forget who was on the Colts the year he was there, but I think that they've got something there. And the main thing is that he's someone who will coach within the scheme. And like I said, I'm not trying to exonerate Barry. Like I said, there are things that I don't agree with that he does from a schematic standpoint, but I also don't think he's as like dumb and lacking of adjustments as a lot of fans think he is. Like, if you watch the minutia, and I know Sam does great breakdowns and he's done a million different things on it, Barry's tried things, and whether it's the guys he's got can't do it, or if it's just, even if they are doing the things he's coaching and the other guys are just better, you just kind of have to tip your cap. And like you said, Nick, remember that this team is built to stop, not stop, but to limit the passing game, not snuff out the run game. And I just think those things are kind of a bygone of the past, where it's like you're gambling on one side or the other of the thing. Because it's like, to really stop any run game, you either have to have just world beaters up front, like that San Fran team had before, when they had, Nick Bosa as a rookie, you had Eric Armstead, and you had DeForest Buckner. And then look what happened to them. They couldn't keep Buckner, and then they thought, their fans foolishly thought they drafted his replacement, and then they had to go out and sign Javon Hargrave because what's the kid? I can't think of the kid's name. Kinlaw from South Carolina.
Yeah, Javon Kinlaw.
Surprise. He wasn't DeForest Buckner, but it's very rare that you find guys who are definitely are able to, or not guys, but teams that are able to really take both things away without having either some kind of schematic weakness or some makeup of their defense where there is a weak point and it's just a matter of, can you attack it? And that's where, like I said last year too, as much as I thought the defense was going to be better, My biggest problem for the defense is that the offense couldn't score enough. And I know that sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people, but it's like this defense is made to play in shootout type scenarios where it's like you said, it's the bend don't break idea, and it's like, okay, we're gonna let you run the ball, but we're banking that we're gonna be able to stop you on some critical down. But if the offense can't score and the defense is like, well, I'm built to stop the pass, but if the other team doesn't need to pass, like, we'll try, but that's not our calling card and stuff. And like I said, it's not to exonerate Barry, but that's how this team was built, because you're thinking with the 4-time MVP quarterback that you're going to have an offense that's going to score 30 points a game. And we'll see what Love is able to do on that side of the ball in relation to this defense. And yeah, that's kind of the part of it where it's kind of, there's excitement, but I don't want to say it's nervousness, but that's sort of the like give and go of where it's like, it's exciting to see what this team is going to do this year, but also there could be growing pains. Like, it's very easy to see where those could come in this upcoming season.
The thing that was pissing me off about the Joe Barry not doing more, press man or anything, okay, don't do the press man, but you have to make some kind of adjustment. And he wasn't making the adjustments that he needed to make with his defense. He just kept running out the same scheme, even though he was getting his ass handed to him during those games. Well, you've got to make some kind of adjustments, and that's where LaFleur would step in and say, hey, these guys are doing this. You need to start doing this. And then he would make that adjustment, and, they would start having some success with it. Now, I don't know how true it is. I don't even remember where I read it. But to talk about the disconnect between Joe Barry and Jerry Gray, supposedly, and like I said, I don't remember where I saw this, but supposedly Jerry Gray was finally just telling his defensive backs to go out and do what you think is right. Don't listen to that. Just go do what you think is right. And that's where the secondary started looking a little bit better. Now, obviously, Jerry Gray's not in Green Bay anymore, so that's going to be a weird thing. But I'm kind of interested with what Greg Williams will do. He was with Vance Joseph in Denver for a few years and then went down to Arizona. And according to this article from Dairyland Express, during Williams' time with the Cardinals, the Arizona secondary ranked in the top 10 by pass defense DVOA on 2 occasions. So even with a lot of the, not great players that he had, he was still producing solid pass defense. So that one's going to be interesting to see what he can do with actually a full stable of known secondary. What's he going to do with a guy like Jair and, Stokes coming back from injury and Razul and Keyshawn. And I know Nick kind of said something about him earlier, but I think Carrington Valentine could be a guy that, shows up this year, because I think he's going to be what they were hoping Shamar Jean Charles was going to be. And Shamar didn't end up working out that way, but I think Carrington's going to be one of them sleeper guys from the 7th round that could step up and be a player. So it's an interesting outlook. I really think that, like I said, Joe Barry has to learn to adjust. You can play zone, you can play press, but you got to know when to adjust to go to the opposite side when you need to play that opposite side. Don't just keep running the same game plan throughout the whole game when you know it's not working. You got to do something to adjust to what the other team's offense is doing.
Yeah, I feel like the point that Mike made, I think, is like a very astute observation. This fact that the defense wasn't given a lot of ideal situations to work with. That's a really big part of it.
Because about that.
Like all the times that they performed at their best was when they got into those kind of shootout scenarios. I mean, even like the Cowboys game, part of that was like some silly Dak choices as well and poor throws. But I mean, that's just how it goes on defense. And like it will be interesting to see how they maintain any kind of success into next season, because I think they were the 3rd most dependent on turnovers. Like their defensive production was in the league was the 3rd most dependent on turnover. So, well, that's probably not the greatest thing to be banking on as far as consistency. So we'll see how that works out. But again, part of that is just making the most of the opportunities that you do get. So I guess we will see, and hopefully when Stokes comes back and maybe Savage kind of has a bit of a bounce back again, and even like Anthony Johnson Jr. is really intriguing. I think he has more potential than any kind of backup option we've had in the past couple of years. I mean, we're kind of sitting here getting excited about like UDFA safeties, like, oh wow, he might be a third string for us. How incredible, and like that's all well and good, and like obviously I support the UDFA guys, but there's kind of a thing in Green Bay where we just get super excited about depth pieces, and then like even like sometimes the second stringers are actually like not really great. I mean, we get like caught up in like the battle for third or fourth string in a lot of these positions. It's like sometimes you just need to have like players who are good, full stop. Not like Robert Tunyon. He's good if you can scheme him open and you can support him, and you can use his hands, and like that's all well and good. But sometimes you just need players who can just win. Like they're just a good football player straight up who can just win. And that's kind of, again, like going back to things like the offensive line, sometimes I feel like we're kind of like dependent on getting them in the right situation more often than not. But yeah, I mean, this defense, it's just kind of one of those things. It's just funny because like they do some things well and some things like awfully, and like it kind of almost like the Pettin thing where like statistically it's not as bad as it looks or feels sometimes, but it's also like never as good as it should be, right? And of course the talent thing is always going to get brought up. 8 first round picks, yeah, and like it's pretty inarguable that they have underachieved, but hopefully going into these next couple of seasons it'll change if Joe Barry gets the boot and things change in the front office.
Yeah, kind of to go in on Johnson. Sorry, I've gotta run in a little bit, gotta be a dad in a sec, but I think Johnson is not your typical round 7 pick. I know that a lot of people have said it, but Brian Maffey put together this great thread, so I recommend all of you to go and find that on Twitter and just look at the work that Brian put into that one. Yeah, I think Johnson has the chance to be the starting safety for the next 5 to 10 seasons for the Green Bay Packers. He won't start the season. Just everyone's got to remember, even Clinton Dix, he didn't start when he was a first round draft pick. Savage wasn't the definitive go-to starter when he started out either, kind of thing. So it's going to take some time. I expect him to roll into the season probably with Savage and Ford as their starting safeties. Maybe you see Owens battle Ford for it. I do wonder how much like Ford's usefulness on special teams may kind of let them hedge towards someone else, whether it's taking more reps away or if Owens just beats him for the job. I think it's going to kind of come down to those two. But I think Ford, because he has more experience in the system, whereas Owens is coming in he's coming in cold. This is his first season here. But I think Johnson, he has good range. He's a pretty good athlete, not necessarily an elite tier athlete, but he has good range, really good ball skills on the back end. And you see he has, because he's at Iowa State for 5 years. The first 4 years he was a corner. But you see his cornerback skills play as safety because he has good route recognition. When he has to get down in the slot, he has good man coverage skills. The weird thing, and this is something that Maffey pointed out in his thread, is that, and it's weird because he did play cornerback, is that he's high in his back pedal, which means he's not the most efficient changing directions when he gets into coverage drops and stuff like that. But I think that is something that, hopefully Greg Williams can coach up with him and stuff. But I think the most important thing, kind of getting back to run defense like we were talking about, is that he's tough. And even though he is like a former corner, he doesn't shy away from contact like you expect a cornerback to. He's actually got some plays where he's willing to stick his nose in there and stuff. And I know there's, people are like, oh, there's the one where, he kind of had to hog tie Bijan Robinson. I was like, well, it's Bijan Robinson, and
who didn't have to hog tie him?
He ran from the other side of the field, so I don't mind that he dove at him or anything like that. But I think Johnson has a chance to be like, you know, obviously one of the receivers or tight ends is going to be, I think, the most important player. But I think while Van Ness probably will be the best player, Johnson won't be that far behind him when all is said and done, because he's a guy that I thought they could take as early as round 4. And really the only hedging thing was like I said, he's only been at safety for 1 year. So the league tends to push guys back kind of thing and stuff. But honestly, if they took him in round 3, I wouldn't have hated it, because this was such a weird class, because there were so few what I thought were draftable safety prospects. I thought that more of them would go, in that late second, third round range kind of thing. But instead, all the teams were like, this class sucks, so we'll just get them later kind of thing. And so they all slid an extra 1 to 2 rounds or whatever, and you had Johnson just slipping towards the end of the 7th round. So I'm really glad that Groot was able to scoop him up there. And like I said, sorry, because I've got to dine and dash on this one. But I think, one of your talking points that you had, Nick, was, what is the defense? What are the things that we should look forward to in terms of internal improvement for the defense? So I think one of the biggest ones would be Quay Walker continuing the upward trend we saw in the back half of his season. He was really settling into that inside linebacker spot. He and Devondre had also, bounced back from a rough first third or half of the season, and the two of them were really playing well off of each other. And I think that that's something where the two of them having a full season with each other under their belt, they cover a lot of ground. Quay more athletically, and Devondre just because he's so like lanky and he just takes up a lot of space. He's not necessarily a big guy, but he takes up space with his long arms and his wingspan and stuff like that. But Quay taking a step would be just a big leap for this defense, because you solidify the middle of the defense. That's where Green Bay's been weak for since the Super Bowl season, realistically, and it's going to just take this defense up another level. And then I think the thing I'm most interested to see is what starting D-line do they go to? Like I was kind of mentioning earlier, is I think it would behoove them to move Kenny off of nose tackle for the most part, especially when they're in their 3-4 base defense, their true base defense, just because unless they're playing the Vikings so he can sun his son Garrett Bradbury on every play, they're better off having him over a guard where he can just emulsify the interior offensive line as a, kind of like a hybrid 3-5 technique interior D lineman. And then you get Slayton, who I think made a pretty decent jump last season. I thought, everyone's like, well, he wasn't, a world beater, but I was like, he's a 5th round pick who became an average NFL player. And I think too many fans don't appreciate how much of a jump that is for a second year player to make, who's not a top day 1 or day 2 pick kind of thing. Like, that's a big deal for a guy who could, as a round 5 or later pick, you can be cut any day of the week kind of thing, and the team won't really lose sleep over it. For that kind of player who was deemed a project to become a league average player in his second season, that's a pretty big jump in my book. And then Wyatt also being able to step forward in what will be his second year and assume the other starting DN spot. I think if you're able to get, like I said, they play so little base, but if that's your starting, base defense, and then you kind of that, like I said, they're not quite at the point, but really they are, because they've overloaded Kenny for his whole career. You've got to try get him into the 60-70% range, not playing upwards of 80-84% of snaps on the season, just because, like I said, I think he's still got a lot of good football ahead of him, but he's only getting older, and the amount of mileage on him, it just compounds at this point of his career. So you're at the point where you want to reduce his in-season wear, and by getting him off the nose when you can, I think that's going to help. And then I think it'll just give this defense a different a different look to it, to have, Kenny kind of playing that strong side defensive end. It's a defensive end on a 3-man line, but it's really a interior lineman position. And then you have Wyatt playing on the what is the weak side defensive end in the 3-4. And so you just get like a little bit of different juice on that front, as opposed to like, and then it just gives you more meat on the front, as opposed to like, well, there's Dean Lowry and we're going to run at him every time he's on the field and stuff. So though I think there's going to be some addition by subtraction, and it really is just going to be on guys in their second, third season, stepping up, stepping into roles, and just really taking the bull by the horns on themselves. And then the rest of the spaces, like we said, this defense, it's not expected to be some top 10, even top 15 unit this season. But if those positions are able to be solidified and fortified, and they're able to buy time for Stokes to come back from, I don't think he's going to be ready for the beginning of this, just because hearing that it was like a Liz Frank and stuff, caution is going to be the name of the game with him. Just let him get back into things, and then, so, hold the fort while he gets healthy. See if you can get Savage back to the guy he was in 2020 and early in 2021, and then get Johnson up to speed. And, just like I said, you're just trying to see which guys are building blocks and which guys you're kind of like, hey, guy, thanks, but we're going to look for in another direction. So that's really what I think the mission is on defense is. And like I said, they're not looking to be a top 10 unit, but what this unit has to be is serviceable, because to get a fair evaluation of Love, this defense can't be getting dog walked up and down the field every Sunday. They have to provide resistance, because Love needs to play in at least tight, even if every game is a shootout, he needs to be within a score kind of thing, so that it's not like he's got to play from down, he's not just saddled with being minus 14 every week kind of thing. And then every defense is just pinning their ears back on him kind of thing and stuff. So they have to give him, a fair shake at it, because that's the only way that anyone's going to get a real idea of what Love is. And if he's able to play well and the offense is able to score some points, that's in turn going to help the defense look, better than it, maybe it is in aggregate kind of thing.
Oh yeah, love it. No, totally. Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't have said it better
myself. There's really nothing else to add except for, I would throw Benny Sapp in there too. I know Nick just shit all over the UDFAs, but I think Benny Sapp is a guy that could probably step into. He's got the lineage. He's got the ability. The only reason why he didn't get drafted, according to some people, is because he suffered a few injuries in college, and that kind of held him back a little bit. But if he can stay healthy and he can live up to his talent, he should be able to be a solid guy in that room too. But yeah, that's about, I mean, there's not much more I can add to what Mike just said, because that hit on all the parts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, well, I think with that, we're basically ready to finish up here. As always, guys, you can find Mike at Kawano Mike, myself at Nicholas GRGR, Joe at Iowa_Joe86, and of course, the podcast at Outback_Packers. Until next time, we'll see you later.